This week, everything you need to know about Hunter. And no, we don't mean Hunter Biden, because we don't do politics here. We're better than that. And normally, we're better than using clickbait, and while I don't have a bikini girl on the thumbnail, the title was meant to draw you in. So no, this won't be a Hunter bashing video. Hunter is sort of a really unique brand because while they do sell a lot of boats and have a whole lot of market share in the sailboat world, they're also arguably the most hated brand in boating. So a little disclaimer before we get started, I will be reading from a script just this side of the camera because while I did try to make the $4 teleprompter from a YouTube video, my GoPro just doesn't work behind a teleprompter, and the only cameras I own are GoPros, so we're just going to have to deal with it. So before we take a trip down memory lane and discuss how Hunter came to be, let's discuss some of the overwhelming stigma of the brand. And I think before we do that, let me get my personal feelings out of the way. I've sailed on a number of Hunters, older Hunters, new Hunters, and I do have a healthy respect for the 375, the Hunter 375, because I've sailed on two of them, one with the arch and one without the arch. The things I like are the roominess. The cockpit and the cabin are just massive. I like the sugar scoop. I like the interior layout. It's very livable. And Hunter does currently hold the most people in the cockpit record at my club at 26 people. So it's a fairly roomy boat. My only real beef with the 375s that I've been on is the rig, the lack of a backstay. For whatever reason, during that period and on some of their boats, Hunter opted to not have a backstay holding up the back of the mast, instead favoring having raked back spreaders so that the shrouds actually were further aft than the mast, sort of making up for the lack of a backstay. I'm really not sure what the benefit here was. For me, it means that you can't truly sail downwind, wing on wing, because the boom can't extend to 90 degrees of the mast because the shrouds are in the way. So there's never really a downwind sailing ability of that boat, and you always have to worry about jibing the main across. It seems like a big problem for me. That configuration also means the rig is significantly more complicated. It's got X-bracing in between all the spreaders, and it's got a really weird sail plan where it's got a very big boom and mainsail, and then comparatively a smaller fractional jib, and I just struggle to see the point. Okay, so my personal feelings out of the way. Why do so many people hate these boats? Anywhere you go on the forums on the internet, Hunter is the most hated boat in the world, and I think there's two parts to that. And first off, it's got a bad reputation, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But my second point is I think there's a lot of jealousy there, and stay with me here. On the jealousy side, I think a Hunter gives you so much bang for buck, and it's sort of a big boat, bang for buck, that it's really easy to be mad at the Hunter owner for having so much accommodating room in their boat. The bigger cockpit, the bigger cabin means that the dinner parties are probably going to be had on the Hunter, as opposed to anything with a little bit less room. So the Hunter bang for buck offers almost as much room as the bigger boats, the Beneteaus and those kind of things, a lot less cost. So I think there is a little bit of a jealousy thing for those of us that don't have a Hunter, and we look over and we see 18 people dining in comfort on a bigger Hunter, and that sort of sucks. And that's just my 2 cents. The jealousy thing, maybe I'm wrong. But on to the really big deal, and the really sort of overwhelming stigma of Hunter is quality. So we're talking about the newer breed of Hunters, the production boat, not the older Cherubini or 80s or 90s Hunter designs that are just like every other 80s and 90s sailboat. They tend to hold up well as long as the hull is taken care of and the rig is taken care of. The newer Hunter boats, the production boats that tend to be known as floating condos or dock queens, that's what we're talking about. And I really don't see, after talking to the owners and scouring the internet and sailing on them, I really don't see the problem with these boats outside of the same problems that Beneteau or Catalina or anybody else has. They're newer production boats, they're roomy, they were never intended to go do a 4-week crossing of an ocean or something like that. They were intended to be coastal cruisers, maybe a little bit more than that, and Mind you, some have crossed oceans, some have gone from North America to Europe, or from Europe to North America, or out to Hawaii, or whatever it is. That's just sort of not what I feel like they're for. They're for really, really comfortable, happy boats to go and do coastal cruising with. I think Hunter gets a bad rep because it's sort of at the bottom of the price range. When you're looking at a newer production boat, you have sort of the Beneteaus at the top, right under that, the Catalinas, the Jeanneaus, that kind of thing. And the Hunter sort of gets a bad rep for coming in $20,000 under those boats. And they have the same engines, they have relatively the same rig, fractional, big boom, big main. They're relatively the same boat, in-mast reefing, all that kind of stuff. Electric winches, the ones that I were on had electric winches. They seem like wonderful boats, and they do seem to be genuinely the same as any other production boat. I think that where they get their bad rap is somewhere on the internet. At some point, everybody decided they were going to bash on Hunter. McGregor was the ugly stepchild for a long time, and now it's Hunter. So that sort of is what it is. So I think let's get into, where did Hunter come from? Why is it here? Let's talk about the history of Hunter. A German immigrant named Henry Lurs, Luhrs, owned a chandlery and worked on a lot of boats in the 1800s. The boat business stayed in the family, with his sons and grandsons building thousands of power boats, and then Hunter itself was actually founded in 1973 in Florida. I kind of divide Hunters into three different categories. The first category for me are the early boats designed by John Cherubini. And of these, they're sort of typical boats of the late 70s and 80s. Good fiberglass hulls, typical rig, typical layout. They weren't much different than anything else on the market at that time. But I do have a little bit of experience sailing on a Cherubini Hunter 33. And the only thing I found of the mid-30s range boats of that era was it was a bit roomier inside than, other brands. So not much difference. In 1988, the company found financial trouble. The owner, Henry, was away doing some ocean racing and had to cut his ocean racing short and come home in a rush to save the company. In 1991, a new boat designer was hired to continue the Hunter brand. That was Rob Mazza from Canada. Following that, Glenn Henderson came on to design Hunter boats. In the second era, the Glenn Henderson era of Hunter boats, Hunter was sort of known for innovation, doing things that nobody had done before. They sort of included a stainless steel arch on the back of the boat, soon to become a fiberglass arch on the back of the boat, which the main sheet was on top of and came down the sides, keeping the main sheet out of the cockpit, which I guess is sort of cool. They also started using the B&R rig that we talked about earlier with no backstay, that I'm not a big fan of, but a lot of people do like. In 2011, Hunter again found itself in financial trouble and entered Chapter 11. This is when David Marlow of Marlow Yachts bought Hunter, making it Hunter-Marlow. Marlow is responsible for some high-end luxury stuff, big yachts. And that sort of shows a little bit of the high-end trim that you find on some of the newer Hunters. The third category that I place Hunter boats in is the most interesting category to me. Two things of note happened in this category, and I'm not talking about by the gear, I'm talking about by the design. The first thing that happened was the Hunter Legend. And this is sort of like the Beneteau First series. It's the go-fast version of the normal Hunter line. These boats employ a more race-ready layout, more race-ready rig, while actually sacrificing very little of the roominess and comfort that we came to expect from Hunter. I've sailed, personally, on a Hunter Legend 37, and honestly, it's on my bucket list of boats I'd love to own, the Legend 37. It is just fast. The other notable boat produced in the era of Hunter that interests me most is the Hunter HC50. And it's okay if you've never heard of it. I have my own personal experience with this boat that I can share with you, and believe me, you'll want to pay attention to this thing. If you're a long-time subscriber to the Lady K channel, you'll probably already know what I'm talking about with the HC50. And if you don't remember, here's the story. In 2018, Lady K was on her way down the eastern seaboard. I was sailing her down from sort of New York to Florida on the way to hit the Bahamas, and stopped, the timing lined up so I could stop in Annapolis in Maryland right in time for the Annapolis Boat Show in October. So it was late September, pull into the Annapolis harbor, anchor in Back Creek. Everything's beautiful. There are just, if you've never been there, it is just something you have to do if you're a sailor. And there are just tens of thousands of sailboats throughout the Annapolis area. So you can jump in your dinghy and you can see everything from old Morgans to brand new Benettos. Even before the boat show, it is a boat show. It's wonderful. But Candace and I were sitting in the boat having sundowners one night and before the boat show started. And we were commenting and talking about, what would we buy if we had, a $500,000 budget, which of course we didn't, and I still don't. But what would we buy? And the thing that I kept coming back to is I love these new boats, the plumb bow, the big cockpit, the sugar scoop, the fold down trend. It's all wonderful, 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 wonderful. But none of these boats are truly pretty. None of these boats are boats that you stand back, these production boats, the newer boats that you stand back and you look at and you go, wow, it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing to behold. It's a work of art. None of them really tick that box for me, and that's always bothered me a little bit. So Candace and I were talking about it in the anchorage and sort of looking around, and we can see maybe 700 or 800 boats from where we were anchored. And nothing was pretty except the old boats with, the double enders with the wooden bowsprits, just beautiful, beautiful old boats. But none of the new stuff really is that pretty or didn't appeal to me in that way. And just as we were saying that, something pulled into the anchorage that was pretty. And it was really weird timing. So this 50-foot boat creeps into the anchorage and actually anchored right beside Lady K, so it was pretty cool. But it was beautiful, absolutely. A newer production boat nonetheless, but absolutely beautiful. The lines, the rigging, everything was just, you kind of look at it and go, ooh, what's that for? And what's that for? And what's that for? A very interesting boat and very, very pretty lines. So of course I jumped in the dinghy and I ripped over there. So I'm going to share with you some footage from that. And this is from the original GoPro 5 that we started the trip with. So it's a little bit shaky and the footage isn't very good. I'm not even going to include the audio. So I jumped in the dinghy and I went over there. The Hunter HC50 is just an incredible innovation sort of boat. The things they did in this thing are incredible. And the purpose of the boat is strictly just to cross oceans and go out there and bash into waves and just do mile after countless mile of hard travel to get from one continent to the next and do whatever it is you can possibly want to do with the boat. The couple that owned it welcomed us on board. They were from Sweden and they were on, I think it was their third circumnavigation with the boat, and they had come to Annapolis to put it up for sale for $275,000. So some of the innovations this boat has, and remember this is a Hunter, one of the coolest things is as you come onto the back of the boat, on either side in the back quarters there are water ballasts. So if you set out on your journey across an ocean and it's blowing like crazy and you find yourself heeling quite a lot, you can pump water into the high side water ballast to actually take some of the heel out of the boat by up to 7 degrees of heel, which makes the boat faster, more stable, more comfortable. It's just a wonderful thing, and there's ballast on both sides so you can do it both directions. The next thing we notice as we come down into the boat is there's a hard dodger with lower elevation seats under the hard dodger that have access to the entire autopilot navigation system, so you can drive the boat on the long term from under the dodger in a protected scenario. As you come inside, the nav station is massive, and the nav station is actually on a gimbal, and I love this. So when you're doing 3 weeks on a 30-degree heel, you can set the nav station to that 30-degree heel so that your nav station is level, so you can do your charting or make your YouTube videos or whatever it is you're doing. Coming forward, one of the other cool things is the anchor locker. The anchor chain actually doesn't live in the bow like it does on a normal boat. It comes down a pipe and it goes into its own compartment in the bilge on top of the keel. So all of your 300 feet of 3/8 anchor chain, which weighs just a zillion pounds, sits on top of your keel, which is exactly where you want it in a sailboat. Wonderful, wonderful innovation. The only complaint the owners had was he said it was like having a 35-foot boat on the interior and a 50-foot boat outside. But I think that's what you get from having a go-fast, purpose-built, just fly around the world sort of a boat. He said sometimes they were able to maintain more than 12 knots on an ocean crossing with really, really good wind, water in the ballast, doing their thing. More than 12 knots as a maintained average. It's insane. I don't know what the hull speed of this thing is, but if you're interested, look up the Hunter 50, because I think the HC50, sorry, because I think it's probably the coolest Hunter ever made. If you like today's video, shoot me a thumbs up. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. And if you want to help support the channel for a couple of bucks an episode, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/LadyKSailing. I will see you guys next week.